As the cartoon strip character Pogo said more than 50 years ago, we have met the enemy and he is us. I'm Dan Ringer and we'll talk about balance right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
The Law Works is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system.
The shootings at Virginia Tech and in Tucson, Arizona bring into sharp contrast the need to protect American citizens while also protecting their rights. My guest is attorney Elliot Hicks. Elliot, thanks for being back.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be here as always.
When I was thinking of what to call this program, the phrase that ran through my mind was, what the heck's wrong with people? and I suppose in some part that's really what we're talking about, because we, as a society, we seem to have a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality. And it seems to be bubbling up now. How can we protect our people from our people? It seems like a conflict of rights, and we're going to have to throttle back somewhere.
Well, it seems like one of the things I've always said about people is that everybody's got some side of themselves that they don't want you to know about. And I think that that side that they don't want you to know about is probably the part that people need to be protected from. You know, how we do that and yet let people express themselves is a difficult and thorny question, and that's how laws rise up, I guess. I guess that's why we have laws.
Well, in the hardest times, the worst of times, you see the best of people and you see the worst of people. And we have seen some heroic acts by people trying to, I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is these shooting cases, trying to stop shooters, throwing themselves in front of someone else and getting seriously hurt or killed. But if we say, you know, we need to do something about that, Lee Harvey Oswald ordered his gun through a catalog, then everybody gets upset. You know, what are we going to change? How are we going to stop that? In 1963, we stopped it by stopping, supposedly, mail order sale of guns. But that was pretty much the last thing we did with regard to firearms to slow down the availability of them.
Sure. Well, I mean, with everything else, too. I mean, one of the things that I've joked about is how we criminalize sports drinks, we criminalize shoes. We try to stop the problem after it's happened, but what that does, it changes the availability and the ease with which we travel, the liberties that we enjoy. We really like our liberties. There's good reason for that. That's the reason we enjoy what we are here in the United States. That's the reason we take such pride that you know, we sometimes feel better than others because of the liberties that we enjoy. But you know, how do we do that? Well, you know, the law tries to strike a balance between what people can do to express themselves and what other people, their neighbors, can do to express themselves. And we have to have strong laws, because if we don't, you know, people think they're not protected. We start to have anarchy. People have to know that they will be protected in doing what they want to do, but at the same time, the people who don't want somebody to do something need to know that they'll be protected from what this neighbor wants to do.
Benjamin Franklin is reputed to have said, and I can't confirm that he did say it.
But you weren't there. So.
I wasn't there. So it said something along the lines of, those that would give up freedom for security deserve neither freedom nor security. And over the years, I've wondered, was Ben right? Because giving up a little freedom for security sometimes doesn't seem like such a bad thing. We never came face to face with it until September 11th. And then we began to think, you know, maybe shooting down the occasional airliner is not such a bad idea. And that gets a really negative reaction, but everybody at the time was saying, yeah, why didn't we do that? Why don't we do that?
Well, as long as you're preserving your freedom to do what you want to do, and
that's paramount to me.
Right, exactly. And if we're not, and as long as we're curtailing somebody else's freedom, that's fine. I mean, I hear people often say, well, gee, I don't care. I don't have anything to hide. What they mean is, I don't have anything to hide in that regard. But sometimes they may have something else to hide, and once those freedoms erode, once those liberties erode, then this other thing that they really like to do may be infringed upon. I mean, this is what we talk about when we talk about gun rights and such, that they don't mind being frisked here and there. They don't mind having to, take off their shoes. They don't mind having to go through a metal detector to go one place or another, or they don't mind surveillance cameras at intersections, for instance, because they feel like they don't have anything to hide there. But when it comes to some of the other things that they like to do, they want to make sure that their freedoms are not curtailed in any way. So, what do we do to try to make sure that those people, when they that we can figure out what we can do and what we can't? We talk about the rights of the majority. We do have majority rule here, but the rights of the majority can't trample the rights of the minority. And that's a balance that we try as hard as any country, it seems, to balance. But I'm not sure that I think we do a wonderful job of it. But there's always more to do, and there's always going to be tension there. I guess that's what makes our society fun.
Well, and I agree with you, and I think we do a good job of that, but we do it against the will of the majority. The majority wants to tell you that if you're the wrong religion, get out. If you're the wrong political party, shut up. And that's not what is intended, I think, in the way our country was organized. Our country was organized to protect the rights of the minority, because if we do that, we protect everybody's rights. We're all a minority in some sense.
But I think it's true that there is a large silent majority out there for a number of things where they are indifferent to so many of the issues that come up because it just doesn't affect them. So they're not taking to the streets to try to protect one thing or another. They're not, and that majority is not involved in the discussion sometimes. So what you have is vocal minorities clashing with one another over various issues. I mean, right now we look at the situation in Egypt and we see that they're trying to figure out exactly who is the majority there. They don't know who the majority is. Is the majority just because a number of people have taken to the streets, does that mean that they're the majority, or does that mean that they're the ones who just felt like now was the time for them and for their minority viewpoint to be exposed?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I don't know if this is the place for me to express my thoughts, but oh heck, why don't we go ahead and do that? Yeah, how many people does it take to bring down a government in a nation of tens or maybe hundreds of millions of people? I have no idea what the population of Egypt is, but I have heard it suggested in the riots that they had there. Hundreds of thousands were coming out, and they were trying to get 1 million out. Maybe they accomplished that, but what percentage of the total population is that? And as a country, the United States looks and says, a people should have the right to self-determination. They should decide on their own government. They should have a right to have their government. And then the first thing we do when something happens with another country's government is, frankly, we stick our nose into it and we say, we want you to do this, we expect you to do that. You don't have to do that, but if you don't, we're going to take away all the goodies.
Sure. Well, there's another powder keg that I'll light up here that has to do with our health care debate that's going on. We certainly have a vocal group that says that the whole thing needs to be thrown out. Is that the majority? Polling suggests that it's not the majority, but nonetheless, it's a vocal group, and we hear a lot about that. How many people does it take, and what does it take? Is it just how loud you are? Is it the best organized, even though they may be a very, very small group, and maybe even quite a minority? Is it that they're better organized? It could very well be that that's all it takes is to be organized and to enforce your will, because really the vast majority of people in even a free society society such as ours don't vote. You know, we look at some of the totalitarian countries and we see these crazy turnouts, or not quite totalitarian, but those that, you know, we seem to think has some kind of a hand of control over them.
Let's just call them bad governments.
Okay, let's do that.
Bad governments.
And the people turn out with, you know, 70, 80% to vote. We don't do that anywhere in the United States. But we're the ones that are supposed to have the democracy. So, you know, when we have a small group to turn out on a referendum, you know, a number of California's referendums have been passed with far, far less than a majority of the people eligible to vote, but a number of the people who are energized over a certain situation.
There's an old joke where a baby is born, and it's a healthy baby and develops normally, except that he doesn't talk. He just never says anything. And they take him to doctors, parents take him to doctors, doctors examine him, he says there's no reason why this child's not talking, he's just not talking. Finally, he's about 6 or 7 years old, his mother is baking some cookies and she burns them. And the kid lets out with a string of blue language that would stun a sailor. And his mother looks at him with somewhat mixed feelings. It's just basically overjoyed. You're talking. Why haven't you talked until now? And he said, up until now, everything was okay.
And that's certainly what we have in so many of the political things that come up. So, you know, where do we find out where the rights are? Well, you know, we do that with voting. We do that with polling. We do that.
Well,
with
we try to do that with voting. And everybody says they don't believe in polling, and they go out and hire another poll taker to find out what people are really thinking. I heard the phrase, and I can't pinpoint it. I've asked several people, neither can they. The phrase is the dictatorship of the vocal minority. And that seems to be what we have. It's what we saw in Egypt. A million people go out. That's clearly a minority, but they're very vocal, and they affect significant change. And in the United States, we seem to have the same thing. Although some people try it and they don't quite succeed because, well, they're not a big enough minority or they're not well funded enough.
Well, the power of the press now is so great because we do have, because the ordinary person does have the reach to get to just about everybody in the country if they want to. So we always have freedom of the press. And what does freedom of the press mean? I mean, one of the things that's interesting when we talk about rights is that people seem to have a distorted idea about what their rights are with regard to freedom of the press. They say, you know, I have a right to be published in the paper. Well, not really. You have a right to say what you want to say without recrimination, but that doesn't mean that other people who are in society won't shout you down or won't express opposing points of view. So you can say what you want, but that doesn't mean that that's going to make you popular.
Well, all it means is the government can't tell you to shut up.
Exactly, exactly. And so now we have unprecedented ability to get messages out. It's just a matter of how many people are going to stick to it, how many people are going to jump on board.
We're talking about the fine balance between the needs of society and the rights of its people. My guest is attorney Elliot Hicks. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. It seems like what we experience in this country is fights between people who have obsessions and people who don't. And some will look at you and say, well, you're a gun nut. We ought to put you away. We ought to do something for you. But we're all...
Or to you.
Or to you. But we're all nuts about something.
We are.
For it or against it. Some people believe absolutely that they should have firearms, and lots of them, because they believe sincerely they need to defend their home and their family. And there's some truth to that. I never have. You, I don't know. But I've never been able to escape the feeling that I ought to have something around to protect my family.
Right. Well, I've got guns, but those are the guns that my grandfather had and the guns my dad had. But I don't have any ammunition and have never owned a piece of ammunition. Wouldn't know how to put it in. Wouldn't know what to do with it.
But have you never thought I ought to go get some and I ought to learn how to use these things?
Well, I had a personal experience recently where my house was burglarized while my family was in it. A number of things made that a very difficult, a very frightening situation with my two young daughters there. And, you know, I have never been one to want to, I consider myself a non-gun owner, even though I have these things, because I don't have any ammunition and don't intend to get any. But it certainly made me think about the issue a lot more. I'm not for people carrying guns all over the place. I'm certainly not for people, going to public gatherings and being in bars and things like that where alcohol is served, or having alcohol and having access to guns. At the same time, I have never been opposed to people having guns in their homes, because people do have a right to do that, and people should have a right to do that. The question is how effective that is. That's not, but it's made me see all sides of the issue and see it a lot more clearly. But what do we do with that? Has anybody ever said that we shouldn't have guns in our homes? I don't think so. I haven't heard any politician say that, and haven't heard any significant voices in the public say that. But what do we do about those who want to extend that and carry the guns outside and into public, into gatherings where it could be quite dangerous?
Well, in fact, the government of the District of Columbia did try to tell people you can't have guns in your homes, and it took the United States Supreme Court to tell them to sit down and shut up. We're not going to let you do that.
Right. And in West Virginia, where gun ownership does seem to be a religion, we had a constitutional amendment that was passed a number of years ago, 88% to 12%, that said that no law shall be made that interferes with the right to own and carry a firearm. Now, that's a very sweeping constitutional amendment, and nonetheless, we've done things to try to curtail that or try to put that in a box. But it really, any of those laws go against the plain intent of that constitutional amendment, the plain wording of that constitutional amendment, and we do it anyway. I mean, while we like that sentiment, we don't necessarily like that in real life, and we've done some things to put some fences around it.
Well, the problem we have is, and the NRA will tell you, the guns are not a problem. Mm-hmm. It's the people who have them, and not all of the people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that raises the question of what do we do to anticipate these problems. Mm-hmm. The young man that killed so many people at Virginia Tech, in retrospect, was clearly a very disturbed young man. Sure. The soldier who shot up Fort Benning and killed so many people was clearly disturbed in a different way. The man who goes to Tucson and shoots Congresswoman and many of the people who came to hear her tell them what their government was doing was clearly disturbed. Right. But we don't seem to have any way to anticipate that. We don't.
Well, let's think about our own practices and where we've had to deal with mental hygiene issues. And, one person's eccentricity, a mere eccentricity, is another person's crazy. And so when you try to say this woman who walks down the street yelling at herself and to nobody that anybody can see, is that
she may be on a cell phone.
She may, right, exactly. These days she may very well. But is that person crazy? Is that a person who should not be allowed to, say, defend herself, shouldn't be allowed to own a gun? Or is that somebody who simply has some eccentricities that ought to be indulged so that she can do that and exercise the Second Amendment right that we talk so much about?
We're talking about the fine balance between the needs of society and the rights of its people. My guest is Attorney Elliot Hicks. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. I have, over the years, had many calls from people, and I've had discussions with many others about just this issue, and that is, how different does someone have to be before we can compel them to receive treatment? I talked to a federal magistrate judge not too long ago who had a really, really sad story about a man that he had come into contact with while he was a practicing attorney. He had tried to get him help. He had encouraged help for him, to him. The man was clearly unbalanced. He would present in public in front of children displaying firearms, but never made an overt gesture, never made a hostile comment. The people in the community filed their petition to have him examined to see if he should be hospitalized, if he should receive treatment. They had a hearing. The psychologist at the hearing said, no, he's not a danger. He may be a little suicidal, but under his circumstances, that's a rational decision. There's an interesting paradox, but that's what the psychologist said. Sure. As a result, he was released, and within just a short period of time, he had killed himself. Clearly he was unbalanced.
Sure.
Clearly he needed help, but our system wouldn't allow that to happen.
Well, let's face it. I mean, what we do right now, as I say, when I kind of said jokingly about criminalizing sports drinks and criminalizing shoes, I guess underwear is next. But I mean, but all of this is going to be done in hindsight, and it's a shame. But that's just the way it is. Nowadays, even in the law, we look at certain behaviors and we say, well, good grief, you should have known that somebody could get hurt this way or that way. You should have known that this could happen. You should have known that this person was unbalanced. You might know that that person's unbalanced, but you don't know how unbalanced they are. You may know that somebody could get hurt with a certain implement, or that something could happen that could hurt a person. But the thing is, you don't know what forces are going to combine, and I hate to use the term because it's so overused, to make this perfect storm where the harm that could happen is realized. And so we don't know what to stop, and we really punish ourselves too much when we try to say that, well, we should have known. Well, a lot of times we cannot know. And this is one of the things that we just have to deal with as a society, is that there are things that we cannot know and cannot prevent.
Years ago, I was a law student. I did an internship with a local health center that did a lot of mental health work. And they took me to the state hospitals. They showed me the people who were there. And there were a lot of people who truly benefited from being isolated from the rest of society. The word warehoused. We warehoused people because, frankly, they needed serious 24-hour-a-day attention. And it was nice to have them out of society because they were just a bother. We pretty much released them because of our belief in individual rights. If you want to be different, if you don't want to take your medications, we're not going to make you take your medications. And it didn't take very long before they whoever they are, attached a phrase to the dehospitalization movement. They referred to people dying with their rights intact. Because what we started to find was these people who were surviving in hospitals were dying in alleys in the wintertime. And now somebody may overtly act so bizarrely that we're afraid of them, but we can't do anything to help them. And if you ask the mental health professionals, they will say things to you. Help is available. Plenty of help is available. All they have to do is come to us. They're not going to do that.
Well, let's make it a little less bizarre. I mean, when we talk about bigamy laws and those kinds of things. I mean, there's a popular show on television now about a family that's involved in what is that, I guess, a polyamorous relationship, and you know, exactly how wrong is that? I mean, where does that become wrong? Is it okay for them to decide that marriage is not just one man and one woman? You know, but we do insinuate, the society does insinuate its own laws and impose its own laws on that situation. You know, where is their right to do as they wish? You know, I don't know. It's not quite, you know, it's certainly not anything that I could possibly be into. I can't imagine why a man would want to have more than one wife, for that matter. But but nonetheless, where is society's interest in that? You know, we start to try to talk about the interests of children in that, to try in that kind of a relationship, to try to give the government an opportunity to come in and examine that. When we talk about the things that were happening in Waco and other places, you know, we really we will always have problems trying to figure out where that line is, and you know, how we can best balance the what's normal with what is an individual's right of expression.
Well, and when bad things happen, then we're torn between allowing you to have as many wives as you want and protecting your children from not knowing who mom and dad are. And we actually actively get involved in things like this. Within the United States, it seems that we've almost become paranoid, but are almost literally prohibited by ourselves from doing anything about it. I mean, we get scanned, screened, photographed, prodded, poked, manipulated in an airport. Nobody likes it, but everybody wants somebody else to go through that.
Right. And when we look back on things that happen, on incidents, things that get through, we say, well, why didn't anybody do anything about that? Well, the reason nobody did anything about it is you can't figure out exactly what is enough. What is the balance between our liberties and our safety? That's the shame of it, as I say. I mean, even in the civil law where we practice, we try to say that anybody should have known that this that somebody could have gotten hurt on this, but we just don't know.
Elliot Hicks, thank you for the 2,000th time for joining us. I really enjoy these conversations.
My pleasure.
Thank you also for joining us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. On the LawWorks webpage at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks program topics and additional information about this show's topic. If you would like to recommend this program to a friend, you'll find a video of the program at the LawWorks website. You'll also find free video and podcasts of previous programs on YouTube and iTunes. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future program, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a free copy of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia State Bar, the Mountain State Bar, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.